All right. So, in this video, I'm going to be showing everybody how to approach the modeling of the tankard, the silver tankard. Okay. So, what we need first is our reference plane. Now, we've all learned how to set up projects. Um, uh, Again, I'll just quickly come up to File and you say Project Window. Okay, so I'm just going to go over setting up projects again. So I can create a folder anywhere I want, whether it be on the desktop or whatnot. And once I've created a project folder, I'm going to create a Maya directory in that project folder. So you say, you've got your current project here. I can come over and I can say new, and that's going to allow me to create a new folder. So I'll say that the folder is going to be called Maya, and I can come to location and then tell the Maya folder to be saved in whatever directory that I want. Excuse me. Just had dinner, so. So we can direct Maya to save the folder wherever we want, and once we've found the correct folder, our project folder, we say select, and then you can just say accept, and it'll create all your directories here. So it'll create a scenes directory, assets, images, source images directory, render data directory, clips, sound, scripts, data, movies, another data folder, autosave, so on and so forth. Okay. So once you have that that in there, you're obviously going to want to save your scene, and you say save scene as, and you go through and you find your assets folder and save your projects in the assets folder. So if it's a prop, you would create another folder. You call it prop or props, plural. So under props, okay, and in this case we'd say create another folder, call it Tankard, okay, and in there, in the Tankard folder, we would say Tankard underscore model 01. Okay, and it's very important, remember, to put the 01 because we're going to be saving in indices or indexes, however you want to say it, so that, if we're modeling for a while, we can always go back and say, well, okay, this is 03 file. I kind of screwed something up here. Maybe I'm going to go back and choose 2 to model from 2. Okay, so it's always an option. You should always be saving on a regular basis and indexing your files, because there's nothing worse than doing a little work and having to go back and repeat a bunch of work that you've already done. So it's always a pain in the butt to do that when you don't have to, especially if you're working in a production setting. You don't want to have to go back and repeat work. So and you'll say save as. I'm going to hit cancel because I'm not gonna go through all the process of creating a project folder, but I will save the file. So I'm just going to say save scene as, and I'll just say save it to my desktop, and I'll say I'll just create a new Tankard file, and I'll just save it in here. So Tankard model 01. I'll save it as a my binary file. That's fine. And I'll say yes. Okay, so first thing I need is I need a little bit of reference on my screen. So we went through how to do this in class. So what I need is a polyplane. Okay, so let's go into the Create menu, and I'll pull off my Create tab. I'll just put it over here. And under Poly Primitives, I'll create a plane. So here's my plane. I'll hit the F key, focus in on it, and I'll come over to inputs under my channel box editor. Okay, and if you're not in the channel box editor, you can always hit Control A with this object selected. So I'll select it, hit Control A. So remember, we can toggle back and forth between the channel box editor and the attribute editor. And I'll come over to inputs and polyplane. So I'll click that. And I can say subdivisions width and height. I'm just going to simplify this and call 1. I'm going to say 1. Okay, so that's just killed all the subdivisions in this because I just need a flat plane, right? And then I'll come up here and I'm going to rename the plane. We'll say front ref plane 1. Okay. Okay. And always, always put a 1 in front of objects, and if you have a duplicate of an object, make it, front ref plane 2. But always put a 1 in front of it. It's always good practice to have really good naming conventions. So whenever you're naming an object, just say front ref plane 1 or whatever 1. Okay. So I got my plane here. And I know that my image that I'm going to be putting onto this has a resolution of 960 pixels by 1080, 960 by 720. I'm fairly certain. So 960 by 720. Okay. And I'm going to zoom out. Okay, I'll hit the F key just to speed this up. And with my plane selected, I'll just scale it down. But because it's 960 by 720, now I know that it's the proper aspect ratio, same ratio as my image. And I'll go into the rotate key, and I'm going to rotate this by 90 degrees on the X. Rotate X up here. Okay. And I hit the E key to go into rotate, by the way. And then I'm just going to hit the W key and move this up. Okay. Just that it's sitting on the bottom there. Okay, the next thing I need to do is I need to be able to put an image on this plane. So how do we do that? Well, we have to project UVs onto this first. And again, I briefly mentioned, I touched on UVs. UVs are a way for Maya to understand how to place an image on a 3D mesh. Because for every vertex point, there's also a UV coordinate. And a UV coordinate tells Maya, tells Maya where to put an image. Okay. So we have this plane here. I'm going to go into create UVs. Okay. So that's beside color. So hotbox down here, create UVs. I'll pull this tab off. And I'm going to say planar mapping. I'll click the options box here on the right hand side. So I get this nice handy option box. And I'm going to project on the z-axis. If I look down here, I can see that the z-axis is running this way, the y is up and down, and the x is running this way. So I know this is the x, this is the z, and then the y is up and down. So I'm going to click project from z-axis. Bounding box is fine, and all the other settings are fine. And if you aren't sure if everything is the way it should be, always go to edit, reset settings. Okay. And the only thing it changed was it brought it back to the x-axis on the projection axis, so we can just come down and click this again, and then we can say apply. Okay. And the reason we know that we properly have UVs projected on this guy because we can see this box showed up there. Okay. So I can close this, and I can hit the Q key, and then I'll go back into object mode. Okay, so under inputs we can see under inputs shows our construction history. So everything that's happened to this plane If we haven't deleted our construction history, we can see everything that's been done to it. So this is the creation node here under inputs. We can see that we created a polyplane 1, and it gave us these initial attributes that we could play around with. And now we've also put UVs onto the plane, and that's why it says polyplanar proj for projection 1. Okay, so proj means projection. So what this is showing me is the planar projection of UVs. And we can see that because it says image scale U, image scale phi, yada yada, so on and so forth. Okay? So we have UVs. So we can close down the UV create menu. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the hypershade. So the hypershade is where we create textures and shaders, okay, which then we can place onto any piece of geometry. So think of it, rather than saying shader, you can say material. Okay, material is a better way to describe what we're doing. We're creating a type of material, and then we're placing that material onto whatever geometry we have. So the way we can do that, create materials and edit them, is go into Window, Rendering Editors, okay, Rendering Editors, Hypershade. So I'm going to let go, and here we have the hypershade. Woohoo! Okay. So I don't want any crazy material in particular. I just want a new Lambert material. Now let's just briefly talk about these three guys here. These are what you call your Maya's default materials. Okay. So we have a default Lambert material, a default particle node, and a shader glow node. Okay. So these three guys, don't touch them, because every object in, or especially I should say this guy here, this Lambert 1, every object that's created in Maya initially gets a shader put onto it, and that's this shader here. So you never touch this. That's kind of a general rule of thumb, is the initial shader or the default shader that Maya assigns to objects. So if I click this, if I actually double click this, you can see that when I created this, I can change this. Okay, so that's got that shader on there. I don't want to touch this shader. Okay, I'm going to create a new one. So what I'm going to do is come over here to the left hand side, and I'm going to click Lambert shader. So Lambert is just a matte material with no sheen or gloss on it. So that's what I want. And I've got this in my work area, I've got this Lambert 2 shader here. Okay, so I'm going to double click this Lambert 2. Okay, so if I click off anywhere else here, I can't see anything in my attribute editor, right? But if I come over and I double click this Lambert 2, either in the work area, I can click it in there, or I can click it in the materials area up here. So I'm looking for Lambert 2. I'm going to double click that, okay? And once it's highlighted in yellow and I've double clicked it, it should pop up in my attribute editor over here. So I'm going to rename this to ref front, okay? And I'll say ref front matte for material, all right? And again, naming conventions is really important. So I put matte there just so that we know that it's a material and not something like a piece of geometry or something like that. And under the color channel of my ref front material or matte, I'm going to place a new file node. Okay, so color, so this channel here, I'm going to click this checkered box. So when I click that checkered box, I get this create render node menu that comes up. And there's lots of different things that I can pipe into this color channel. I can put gradient ramps, I can put a mountain texture, a Mandelbrot texture, grid textures, fractal textures. But what I want is an image. So how do you put an image into the color channel? You come to File. Okay. So File. So if you have a photograph of some kind, Just click File. Okay, and if we come down here, I see under File Attributes, under the File 1 tab of the Attribute Editor, okay, I'm going to come over here. I can see this image name, and I'll click the folder, and this allows me to place an image onto this color channel. So let's go and find our image. My image, I can say, actually, I think I have under this guy. Yeah, I think I have. Just a minute, folks. No, not in there. Okay, so I've placed it on my. I have placed it on my hard drive. Tankard 2 is the one I want. So here is my ref front material. Okay, I've got this guy. I can see it's there, and this little arrow means that there is there's something put into this color channel. Okay, and you can see that the slider's grayed out. I can't touch it because there's a file there now. Okay. So the way I apply material to an object is I click the object first, which I've done, so I have it selected. Then I come over to my material, and then I right click and drag up to this top little thing here called Assign Material to Selection. So I'll let go. So now this material is on my plane, but I can't view it yet. Why? Because textured mode in the viewport has not been turned on. The way you activate textured mode is you hit the 6 key. So we'll hit the 6 key, and there's our tankard. Okay, simple enough, right? So when I start modeling this guy, I want the tankard to be sort of sitting on the grid. So I'm going to grab my reference image. I'll hit W, and I'll just select on the y-axis here. When I know, and I know it's the y-axis because it's the green arrow, and when I mouse over the green arrow, it'll turn yellow. So I'm just going to drag it down to about there. Okay, so I have my reference image. So I'll close the hypershade, and I'll zoom in here. Beautiful. Okay. So I'm going to go Control A to get out of the attribute editor and back into the channel box editor. So under the channel box editor / layer editor, I can use my layers. So I want to put this guy onto a display layer. Why? Well, we don't want to be able to select this while we're modeling. So I have my display tab here, and with my plane selected, I'm going to come over to this little button here that says create new layer and assign selected objects. So I'm just going to grab that, click that guy, and I'll double click over the name layer 1, and I'll rename it to front ref disp for display. Okay, and I'll select blue as my color, and I'll say save. So now I can toggle the V key, this little V button on the left hand side if I want to view my object or not view my object, and then I can come over to the right, and I can also toggle between clear, which means that the object is normal, template for T, or T for template, and reference, R for reference. So I'm going to leave it on reference. So that means that I can see the plane, but I can't select it. Okay? Make sense? All right, so now let's start modeling our object. So what do we need? We need a base object. Before we do that, though, actually, let's just check our units. As I said before, each one of these grid spaces is equal to 1 centimeter. So it's really important that we're always modeling to scale, because if we're not modeling to scale and we go to light our scene, lights are based on real-world units. Okay. So I want to make sure I'm modeling in the proper scale. I want to make sure that all the assets that I model are properly scaled. So I know that this tankard is roughly 10 centimeters wide on the bottom. So if I count, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so I can make this guy a little bit bigger. So I'm going to come over here and turn the R to the clear so that it's not showing anything here. Okay, and that means that I can select it. And I'm gonna go into my scale tool by hitting the R key, and I'm gonna grab from the yellow square here just to scale it on one axis. And a lot of things that the one thing I noticed that you guys were doing is you were grabbing and you were scaling on one axis here, and you were going, you know, and then you would start modeling to that. So you got to try to avoid that. If you want to scale things up or down uniformly, meaning the same on all axes, you want to make sure that you're scaling from the center point here. Okay, so I'm going to scale this up to about there. It looks about right. Okay, and I'll just center it like that. So now I've got 5 and 5. So that's about right. And now I can put my object back on reference mode under display. So now I can't select it, but I can see this. Okay. So let's go ahead and let's create our base mesh, or our base primitive for our tankard. So what are we going to use? Well, it's a cylinder, right? If we look at this object, it's a cylinder. So let's start with a cylinder. That sounds about right, right? So I'll come into poly primitives and I'll come down to cylinder. Yay! So there's a cylinder. Okay. And before I do anything, I'm just going to turn my reference viewing off. Okay, I'm going to turn my reference off for a second, and I'm going to focus in on this guy. And I'm going to set the subdivisions axis for this cylinder to, I think 16 is a good number for this. Okay. So I'm going to come over to inputs with my cylinder selected. Under inputs, I can click the name polycylinder 1. I can click that. And again, just like our plane, when we changed the subdivisions height and everything with our plane, we can do the same with this object. So with a cylinder, we can say subdivisions axis. So it's set to 20 right now. I'm going to bring this down to about, I'd say, yeah, 16. Okay. 16 is good. I like that number. Okay. Nice and even. It gives me enough subdivisions coming around. Not too many, not too little. Okay. Just right. Okay. Kind of like Goldilocks. The Goldilocks cylinder. Just right. Okay, so we got our subdivision axes set, and let's start scaling this object up to our reference. So we're just going to turn our reference back on, and with the polycylinder selected, I'm going to hit the R key, and from this yellow cube in the middle, I'm going to mouse over the yellow cube, and I'm going to scale it up. To about there. Then I'll move it up. And I'm going to sit my cylinder right on the grid like that. Okay. So there's my cylinder. And maybe I'll move it over a little bit. And I'll scale it up just a bit more. Okay. Okay. So now I want the top of my cylinder to match the top of the reference cylinder. So how do I do that? How am I going to do that? What's the easiest way to grab the top of the cylinder and stretch it up to the top of the reference tankard? Okay. I'm going to use vertex mode. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on my object and hold and come over to vertex mode, and I'll just select all of these top vertex points. So I can rotate to the side to see this better, and if I want I can even turn my reference off. I can turn the viewing of my reference off just to grab things clearly. And maybe I'll hit the 4 key to go to wireframe mode so that I make sure that I'm not selecting anything on the bottom. Okay. So there's lots of different ways that we can safely select these top verts. So I'm going to go ahead and select those. And I'll turn my reference back on once I have them selected. And I'm going to hit the 6 key. Okay. Because the 6 key, if I hit the 5 key, that'll bring me into shaded mode, but I need the 6 key to be on. Okay, so make sure you hit the 6 key to view your texture on your reference, and then I can just grab this arrow. Make sure, again guys, make sure you're grabbing the arrow right on the y-axis, which is the arrow running up and down like this, and make sure that arrow is yellow when you go to grab it so that it's constraining it on that axis. So I'm going to move it up just like that. Okay, so I can see that that's about to the top of my tankard. Okay, so that's beautiful. And then I'm going to hit the R key. Since I have these verts already selected, I'm going to hit the R key to go into scale, and I'm going to scale it in a bit. Okay, scale it in a bit. Okay, and I'll turn my reference off, and I'll hit the Q key, and there's my base shape. Okay, and if I go into my 4 views, I can see that I've got this nice tapered cylinder. So it tapers as it's coming up. Okay. Okay. Perfect. So now let's start sculpting out our tankard. So the first thing I want to do is I'll come into my perspective view here, and a tankard is a cup. Okay, so we know that the top here is going to have to be pushed down in. So let's try and think about this for a second. What's the first thing that we need to do? Well, we know we're going to have a top edge to this tankard, right? Because if we look at a cup, it has a top edge, and then that top edge will get pushed down and in. Okay, so let me demonstrate that. I'm going to go into face mode, and when I'm in face mode, it's kind of odd. Here we go. So when I'm in face mode here, I'm going to go over to my handy dandy paint selection tool. Okay, so just grab this and move it over. So paint selection is this paintbrush here. So I'll grab that, and I'm just going to come around and select this here. Okay. And the other way I can actually do that, I can select this. I don't have to use the paint selection tool. I can just click and drag over these faces here so that it selects almost everything. Okay. And then I can hit the 4 key to view my object like glass. And I say, well, I only want the top faces to be selected, right? So I want to deselect or unselect everything else. So the way I do that is I hold Control and I click and drag over all the stuff I don't want to be selected. So Control is deselect. Okay. So I just have these top faces selected, and I'm checking that because again I've hit the 4 key to turn shaded mode off and to be in a wireframe, so I can see it like glass. So I know, I'm very certain, I'm very positive that nothing else is selected, and that's really important before you go to use an extrude tool or the bridge tool. Make sure you've got the proper things selected before you use any of the tools, okay? Because you're just going to have to repeat the step and waste some time. Okay. So I don't need the create menu anymore, so I'm going to close that, and I'm going to bring up my mesh editing tools. So let's come in and let's grab the edit mesh menu and pull that off, and let's grab the mesh tools and pull that off, and what the heck, and mesh as well. Okay, so we got these 3 guys, and I'll just organize them there. Alright, so in my side view here I'm going to turn on wireframe mode again, and I'll turn off my grid. And the way I can do that is this little button here called grid. If you look at any of your viewports, you'll see the lighting tab and the show tab. The lighting menu, okay, so there's lighting and show. So under lighting and show, you have this button here called grid. Okay, so there's this button here. It looks like a square. Okay, so I'll turn that off. Turn off my grid. Okay, and I'll do the same for the top here. I don't want to see my grid right now. Okay, so now I want to extrude. I want to use the extrude tool to start modeling the inside of my tankard. So I'm gonna, in the perspective view, I'll turn on shaded mode by hitting the 5 key so that I can kind of see this surface change as I'm modeling. So I'm going to come over to my edit mesh menu, and I'll come down to face, to the face menu of that edit mesh menu. So this is a menu, and this is the face sub menu, and I'm going to say extrude. I'll click extrude. My extrude tool comes up. You guys remember this. I'm going to come to the offset attribute, and I'll click and drag in to a value of maybe 0.2. I'm going to say 0.15 is about right for me. I like that. Okay. So 1.15 I can see. So this means 0.15 centimeters. Okay. So I like that offset. The thickness of this rim I can sort of see. Okay. There's this rim thickness here. I think that's a nice thickness for me. I'm happy with it. You may have a different thickness, but you just do what feels right. Okay. You might like it thin, you might like it thick. All depends on how you like to chug your beer. I love chugging beer. Anyway, with the extrude tool already open, we're not going to do anything after we've changed our offset value and we're happy with it. What we're going to do is we're just going to hit the G key to repeat the extrude tool. So this is really important, because if we don't hit the G key and we start playing around with the thickness, you can see that it's going to mess up that nice work we did to get that offset edge. Okay, because we just wanted to pull in. We didn't want to go up or down. We wanted to pull in and then set this inner edge here. Okay, so we want to hit the G key to repeat the extrude tool and start a new extrusion pushing the surface down. So I'm going to hit the G key, and then I'm going to come up to thickness. And thickness allows me to push in or out. So I'm going to drag to the left, and as I'm dragging to the left, you can see down here in the side view how far down my tankard's, the inside of my tankard is coming. Okay, so I'm going to maybe come down here to the thickness attribute. I'll grab it from the side view now and allow it to take over, and I'll just bring it down to maybe, okay, so that's almost at a value of -14. So let's just say -14. Okay, -14. That looks pretty good. Okay. So -14, that looks okay. But if we can see, if we can kind of see, in fact, I'll maximize this viewport by tapping the space bar. So I'm going to tap the space bar. As we brought this down, we can see the end of the tankard, the end of the inside of the tankard is coming straight down. You can see our lines are really straight. But we kind of want it to, we kind of want the walls of the inside of the tankard to conform to the outside walls. Okay. So what I might do is hit the space bar so that I can see all my views again, and I'm going to come up into the perspective view. I'll hit the space bar here. I'll zoom out, and again I'm still in the extrude tool. I haven't done anything yet. I'm just navigating in my viewport. Now you guys can see how important navigation is in your viewport. Okay, and I'm going to hit the 4 key so that I turn everything to glass. Okay, and with these faces down here selected, I'm going to hit the R key. And the R key is going to bring me out of the extrude tool and into the scaling tool, and it's going to scale it right from the center point of all of these faces that I have selected already. So I'll hit the R key, and so here's my pivot down here, my scale pivot, and I'll grab it right. I'm going to be very careful to grab this yellow cube in the middle to scale uniformly, and I'm going to click and drag toward the right. Okay, just very carefully like that. And I'm looking in this area over here to make sure that I'm not popping through the outside of the surface. So again, if I click this yellow square and I go too far, it's like up, way too far. And you can notice if I hit the 5 key again, I've gone way too far and my normals are flipped because I'm viewing the inside of the surface. So I'm going to grab this again and come back, and you can see that how far is too far and how much is too little. So I'm going to hit the 4 key again so I can see things. And just by looking here, I can see if when this line crosses over, I'm going to be crossing the surface. I don't want that. So I want to kind of keep things parallel. So I'm kind of looking at these lines here and saying, okay, well, how far is too far, and how far is too little? So if I kind of true things up here a little bit and just a little more, a little more, a little more, a little more. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So you can see these lines here. If I hit the Q key, okay, and I go into vertex mode, you can see these lines are nice and parallel with each other, right? So the inside and the outside surface is nice and parallel, running with, we have some nice unity, some nice form. Okay, so that's a nice solid extrusion that we just did. So we'll go back to the 5 key. I'll tap the 5 key, and there we go. Okay. Beautiful. So let's go ahead and add some detail to this. And before I do that, I'm going to hit the S key. I'm gonna not the S key alone. I'm going to say Control S. The S key would set a keyframe on your object. We don't need that, so I'll say Control S to save. and I'll say continue. So I've saved my object. Okay. I always do that like a couple of times. I always say Control S a couple of times just to make sure. Okay. And a way you can make sure that it's saved is hit Control S until it tells you on the command line here, no changes to save. Nice. Okay. So let's go ahead and add some more detail to my tankard. So I'm going to go ahead and add a rim to this. So remember in class we used the Insert Edge Loop tool, so I can click and drag on these edges and add edge loops that go around my object. Okay, so I'll come over to the Mesh Tools menu and I'm going to say Insert Edge Loop. I'll click that, and what it tells me in the middle of the screen is click and drag on edges. So I'm going to come over and I need to select the edge. I need to click and drag over the edge. Okay, so don't let go when you click. You're going to click and hold, and as you click and hold, it's going to allow you to drag an edge onto where you want, and when you let go, it will drop the edge in. That's where it's going to set your edge. So if I click up here and drag, okay, now I'm dragging down until I see a nice area for my edge loop. So I want the base to be rather thick, and I'm going to say, that's good. Okay, so I'm going to let go, and there's my edge loop. Beautiful. Okay. So I have this edge loop here. So now that I've sort of made this cut in my object, I'll say Control S, do another save. Why not? Now I need to pull out these faces in order to create my nice rim. So how do I do that? Well, let's go to face mode. I'll click one of these faces, and I need to select the entire row of faces here. Okay, so if I select one of these faces and I hold down the Shift key, I can double click a corresponding face beside it, and it will allow me to select a row of faces like that. Beautiful. So now what I can do is I can say, alright, well, let's extrude these faces. So I hit the extrude tool over in my mesh menu there, and I'm going to grab the thickness and pull it out by a value of maybe 0.3 looks good. I like that. So once I've done that, I'll hit the Q key to get out of that command, and that's gorgeous. Okay. Okay, so let's do the top. Let's put a nice rim around the top of our tankard. Okay. So I'm going to go in. I'm going to say, well, I need another loop up here so that I can grab a row of faces. I need to create a new row of faces and pull them out. Okay? Because that's the only way we're going to get thickness on this. Makes sense, right? So I'm going to come over to Insert Edge Loop. I'll click and drag. And I'm going to make this thin because this is a drinking lip. This is where somebody's going to drink from. So I'll make it about there. And I'll hit the Q key to get out of that tool. And I'll click somewhere over here. Beautiful. New edge loop. So let's go into face mode. I'm going to click, hold Shift, and double click, and there's my row of faces. Just going to make sure that I don't have anything else selected, which I don't. And now we can come over to extrude, and I'll click and drag on the thickness. Okay, so this is a little bit sensitive, so I'm going to say this is probably going to be a value of 0.1. So again, you can click any of these guys. So I'll click there and I'll type my value in, which would be about 0.1. And I like them apples right there. That's good. Okay, so I'm finished with that. So I can say Q to get out of the extrude tool, and I'll just click over here. Control S to save. Beautiful. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start crisping some things up here. So I'm going to start beveling some of these edges. Okay. So I want to bevel this edge under here, because if I hit the smooth key, you can see, okay, we talked about sub-Ds in the last video, but if I hit, if I've got my object here, okay, if I've got my object, okay, any object I have, if I hit the 3 key, you can see it's gonna try and smooth the object out. And those of you who watched the geometry talk video, which I hope you have, you will understand that you hit the 3 key to see an object in subdivisions mode, which is important because we're going to be smoothing this object at some point. And then you hit the 1 key to get out of it. So 3, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1. 3 for smooth, 1 for not smooth. Okay. So we can see that when we hit the 3 key, all this nice detail we have kind of gets lost. Okay, that lower lip shape is not really being retained very well. And the reason is, remember that when we hit the smooth key, what Maya does is it grabs the average distance between each point and says, it grabs the distance between each point and averages it out. Okay, it makes up the difference by moving all the verts closer to one another based on that distance. So if I hit the 3 key, you can see, well, it's not holding that shape very well. So the way we need to hold the shape is we need to crease our edges, just like was explained in the geometry talk video. So what we'll do is we'll go to edge mode. Okay, so I can select edges now. So I want to crease these edges so that that shape is retained. So this edge here and this edge here. Okay. So I'm going to double click one of these edges. Okay. And what happens when I double click an edge is it selects the entire edge loop. So if I hit the 4 key, you can see it's selected the whole thing. Okay. And if I come down here and if I hit the 5 key again and I double click this guy, it selects the entire row of edges too. Okay, so it goes right around the entire object. So let's bevel these edges. Okay, so to bevel an edge, let's bring up our modeling toolkit because we're getting into some more detailed modeling. So under Mesh Tools, we show Modeling Toolkit, and we'll say Show Modeling Toolkit. We'll click that. On the right hand side, we're going to get our mesh editing tools. So we want bevel. We've got this edge selected, this edge row selected by double clicking it, and we're going to bevel it. So we'll click the bevel tool. Okay. Now it says bevel offset. So I'm going to scroll down with this thing selected. So when we have it set to offset and I click and drag over the screen, we can see the offset is how much the bevel is offset by. Pretty self-explanatory, right? Okay. So I'll change this to a value of maybe 0.2. Okay. All right. And with that value there, I'll hit the 3 key to check out how that's handling the smoothing. Okay. Yeah, not bad. Not bad. Okay. So I'll hit the Q key to get out of that. And now I'll bevel the inside edge. So I'm going to double click this inside edge. I'm going to double click that and I'll say bevel. Bevel. Okay. So let's check out it. Smoothing that. Nice. So we can see the shape is really being much better retained when we bevel that edge. Okay. So I'm happy with that. Okay. So I'll hit the Q key there. And let's do it to the bottom as well. So I'm going to double click this guy, bevel. Okay. Beauty. Okay, so we can really see now if I go into the if I say Q, I'm going to hit the Q key to get out of my bevel tool, and I right click and go to object mode. We can sort of see this nice shape being retained. Okay, so what I'd like you guys to do now is very quickly, I want you to assign a new material over top of this model that we've got here. I'm going to say Control S to save really quick, but let's assign a new material to this so that we can see the specular highlights much clearer on the surface, so that we can get a better idea of the surface's form. So I'm going to right click and hold over my object, just as if I was going to edge mode or vertex mode or face mode. And I'm actually going to come all the way down here to assign favorite material. So you can see here there's this assign favorite material. I want to come over and I want to come up to the blend material. So a blend is like a shiny material. So I'm going to let go on that, and you can see that this blend material has this sort of shine to it. And if I click over here, you can really see how pronounced that is. So I can rotate when I tumble around my object. I can see this sort of this specular highlight. Okay, or as we call it in painting, a hot spot. But now I've got this glossiness on my material, so it allows me to kind of view my object a little bit better. So with the smoothing, we can sort of see what's happening. Okay, to the different parts of our tankard. Okay, we can see how it's handling it. So if I click my object and I go out of smoothing, okay, I'm going to toggle back and forth. 3, 1, 3, 1. So am I happy with this lip here is what I'm going to ask myself. I don't know. It's a good question. You know what? I'm happy with it. I like it because it's got a little bit of curve, but it's not. It doesn't seem like it would be something to be uncomfortable to drink out of. You wouldn't want this sharp lip when you're drinking out of it, right? You want it to be nice and soft. So I'm going to leave that as it is. Okay. I'm going to leave that as it is. So now for the inside. If I hit the 3 key, okay, and I'm going to go to 4, I'm going to change to wireframe mode, and we can sort of see that when I hit the 3 key, we can see the inside is doing this weird bow shape like this, and we don't want that. We want the inside to be just as crisp as the outside, right? Makes sense, right? So if I hit the 3 key, 1 key, 3 key, 1 key, 3 key, you can see that there's this nasty sort of shape. So let's get rid of that. We need to bevel the inside of our cylinder. So I'm going to hit the 5 key, and I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to go to edge mode, and I'll just double click this edge here, and it selects that ring. Okay, and then I'm going to get back into my modeling toolkit so that I can bevel this edge. So I'll come over here, and you can see that there's this modeling toolkit tab now that we opened it up. So I'll click that, and I'll come down to my bevel tool and just say bevel. And then I'll adjust that bevel, just like that. Okay. And I'll hit the 3 key. Whoa! Righteous! Righteous! Cool. I'm liking it. Okay. Perfect. So I'll hit the Q key to get out of that. And I'm pretty happy with this. This is nice. Okay. And I'll go to object mode. Beautiful. So I got the makings of a nice smooth tankard. Sweet, cool beans. I loves it. So now let's get our faceplate going. So I want to create the faceplate nicely on the z-axis. Okay, so let's go into the let's get out of perspective mode, and I'm just going to move my mesh tools, and my mesh menu over there. And the z-axis is in the front viewport. Okay. And if we notice down here, we've got this little blue Z here. We've got the green Y going up and down, and the x-axis going left and right. So that's indicating where those are. So in the top view, it would be X is this way, Z is back and forth, and Y is actually straight up and down. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to create a faceplate on this. So we need to drop a couple edge loops in here so that we can cut out a faceplate from the front. So the way we'll do that is we'll come into our perspective view, and I'm going to say edge mode, and under mesh tools, insert edge loop, and I'll drop an edge loop here, and I'll drop an edge loop here. Oh, you did not. It did. Okay, so I'm having this issue where Maya doesn't understand if I'm grabbing the outside faces or the inside faces, and that's probably because they're pretty close together. So the way to fix this is just rotate until you can clearly see an outside edge, and instead of selecting one of these guys, just come over and grab the outside edge like this and click and drag on it, and there you go. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to hit the Q key to get out of that command. And now I'm going to grab 4 of the faces directly on the z-axis. So we got to find that perfect z-axis. Okay, so the way we'll do that is we'll just come over here into the front view. Okay, so make sure that it says front down here. Okay, so I'm going to come and I'm going to select face, and I'm going to say 1, hold shift, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I've got these 4 faces. Okay, so now I want to pull this guy off. So how do we pull off a piece of geometry from an object? Well, we need to say extract. So that's under mesh, submenu separate, extract. So make sure, be very, very careful before you do this that you don't have any other faces selected. So again, I'm going to hit the 4 key to see my object as glass, and I'll just kind of tumble around, and I'll say, okay, yep, I'm ready to go. I'll go back to the 5 key, and I'm going to come up to separate in the mesh tool submenu, and I'll say extract. Okay. And when I say extract, before I do anything else, I want to delete the history on this object. So I'll explain more about why we do this later, but for now, just come up to edit. Okay, I'm going to click edit. I'm going to come down to delete by type. Make sure it's delete by type. Do not say delete. If you say delete, it's just going to delete the object. So delete by type, history. Okay. So now I'm just going to click anywhere on the screen, just off to the side, and I can now click this object. I'm going to make sure that I go to object mode, okay, so that everything, both these guys are out of component mode, and I'm going to select this object here, okay, and I'm going to go to the move tool by hitting W, and very carefully I'm going to make really sure that I'm moving only in the z-axis. So how do I do that? I'm going to look for the blue arrow, which is the z-axis. I'm going to mouse over it until it goes yellow, and I'm going to grab it and pull it out. And I want to be really careful to grab it and pull it out just on the z-axis so that I can leave it there, so that after we've modeled this faceplate we can just go and put it right back. Okay, so I'm going to pull it out here, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to select my tankard, and for now I'm going to hit Control H to hide it because I don't want to be looking at my tankard right now. Just want to be looking at this faceplate. So let's say Control S to save. Okay, I'm going to hit it a couple of times. Just keep hitting it, and it says no changes to save. That's wonderful. So now let's do a save index. So we have Tankard Model 01. We've done enough work. Let's come up to File, Save Scene As, and I'm going to say Tankard Model, and I'm just going to get rid of the 1 and put a 2, and there we go. So now we're on our second index. We're cooking with gas. Okay, so let's select our faceplate and hit the F key to focus in on it. So the first thing I want to do is I want to take this guy and I want to extrude it. I want to give it thickness, okay? Because right now it's a flat plane. So I'm going to go to face mode. I'm going to double click one face, which will allow me to select everything, okay? And I'm going to say extrude under my edit mesh menu. So I'll just say extrude. And on the thickness attribute, I'm going to drag to the right. So this is very sensitive. So I want to make sure that I'm dragging to the right. If I drag to the left, it's going to flip my normals like this. I don't want that. So when I come over thickness, I want to drag to the right so that it's nice and gray. And I'm going to say a value of 0.05. Okay, is what I would want. Okay, I'll hit the Q key to get out of that, and then I'll just click anywhere else on the screen to deselect my faces. Okay, so now let's zoom in on one of these edges because I want to round these corners. So I'm going to go up to edge mode. I'll select one of these edges and I'll say F to focus in, and then I'll just pan over here. And then I'll select this edge here. Select that edge. I'll hit F to focus in on it, and now I can rotate around. So I want to round these edges. Okay, I want to round these corners. Okay. So how do I do that? Well, I'm going to come over to the bevel tool, and I'm going to bevel that edge. Okay. So if I zoom out, well, it's not a very rounded corner if I zoom out, is it? So from this point of view, like if I zoom way out, it's not very rounded. So with my bevel still active, I'm going to drag until I get sort of something I want. So I'd say something that's about a value of 0.1 looks pretty good to me. Okay, and if I zoom in a little bit more, I want to make sure that I'm also adding divisions to this guy so that it's a nice smooth offset. So right now I don't think I have any divisions in this. So I'm going to come over to my modeling toolkit and scroll down until I see segments. I'll click the segments, and then I'll come back here and click and drag, and it'll add some segments. And I want to make sure that I'm adding segments in an even number. Okay, so bevel segments, we're going to add an even number so it can be 2, 4, 6, or 8, whatever your heart desires. So I'm going to go with 4. Okay, and then I'll hit the Q key to get out of my bevel tool. Okay, so let's do that to all 4 corners. Okay, so I'm going to come down here, select this edge, bevel, and now that I have my settings all set, I can just select the edge and say bevel. So I'll come around to here now. Okay, I'll hit the Q key to get out of my tool. I'm going to select this. So remember, every time you do a bevel, to set your bevel, hit the Q key. Okay, so I've hit the Q key to set that bevel. I'm going to select this edge again. I'm going to come over, I'll say bevel. That's beveled. or rounded, whatever you want to call it. I'll hit the Q key to set that last one. I'll select this edge. I'll say bevel. And there we go. And I'll hit Q again. Beautiful. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to blow away these edges here because I don't need them. Okay, so I'm going to select this edge and I'm going to select this edge. And remember, we want to say, in this case, we just want to say, I think actually, so let me try something there. Okay. So yeah, what we want to say, we'll just say Control Delete. Okay. Control Delete. So in edge mode, we'll select our edges, front and back. Control Delete. Okay. Control Delete. Control Delete. Okay. All right. Beautiful. And there's my faceplate. So I hit the 3 key and I got this really nasty stuff going on. So what's that all about? Well, few things. First of all, when we are talking about 3D geometry, we need to understand that when we go to smooth an object, any 3D package is not going to allow geometry to subdivide properly if you have an insane amount of edges on any particular polygon. Okay, so or I should say not polygon but face in this case. So if I select this face, we can see how many edges are on this face. Well, we got an edge here, we've got an edge up here, and then we've got, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we're already at 7. Okay, so this is not good. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we've got 12. So this is a 12-sided face. Okay, so that's no good for subdivisions. Okay, we either want quads or 4-sided faces, or tris, 3-sided faces. So rule of thumb, you always really want to try and keep everything in quads, never in triangles. Okay, and I don't care who tells you any different, they're wrong. Okay, if somebody says, oh, triangles are okay, well, yeah, they're okay in certain situations, but most cases you want to try to avoid them because they just don't solve very well. Okay, and this is a universal principle in 3D modeling. They just don't solve great. If you're not using subdivision surfaces, you can get away with using triangles because you can just use smoothing angle to calculate, which is another thing. Certain packages have something that's called smoothing angle, so you can make an object seem smooth when you're not actually using subdivision surfaces. But that's a different sort of topic altogether. So how do we handle this situation? How do we fix this? How do we make this quads? Well, there's a trick to it, okay? So we need to figure out how to make all of this nice quads. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to crease this edge and this edge so that we can hold this nice, you know, manufactured shape. So first thing I might do actually is I'm going to come to edge mode, okay, and I'll click this edge in the middle here, okay, and I want to add an edge ring right through the center of this guy because I'm not crazy about having these stretched polygons. Okay, so with one edge selected, I'm going to hold control. Okay, hold control with an edge selected, and I'm going to right click and hold, and you see down at the bottom left hand corner it says edge ring utilities. Okay, so edge ring utilities, so I can drag over here until a new menu pops up, and on the bottom right of this new menu that's popped up it says to edge ring and split. So what it's going to do is it's going to grab the edge ring, meaning on the horizontal it's going to grab all the edges, and then it's going to split those. So I'm going to come down here till I say to edge ring and split, and I'm just going to let go. Okay. Okay, so there's a problem here. So why did this happen? So why didn't it split right through? Okay. Well, it's because this face is not in quads. So if it were in quads, it would grab the edge ring and split. Let me try and do it with these guys. Okay, so it went to a certain it did split it to a certain way, but then it stopped. So I'm just gonna grab these guys. I'm gonna grab this one in the middle here, and I'll hold control, right click, edge ring, sorry, not edge loop utilities. Hold control, right click, edge ring utilities here, and edge ring and split. Okay, so I've got this. Okay. And then I'll grab an edge over here. So I'll grab one of these edges now and I'll do the same thing with it. Edge ring utilities, edge ring and split. Okay. So I've got this this edge split here, and I've got this edge split here. I've got the same on the back. Got this edge split here. Okay. So I've got these odd, weird edge splits. Okay. All right. Well, we need to connect all of these splits up so that it goes right around. Okay. So I'll come over to what's called my multi-cut tool. So this is a really handy tool. Okay. So multi-cut tool, I'm going to click that, and it brings up this like little knife. Okay, so that when I mouse over certain points, it allows me to start a cut from one point and end a cut at another one. So if I zoom in here, what I really want to do is I want to make a slice all the way around this mesh. Okay. So since these faces on the outside have more than 4 sides, Maya doesn't really know to go right through it. And that's one of the bad things about modeling without using quads, is it makes modeling a lot more difficult. Okay. So now with my multi-cut tool, again, it's over here, so you can click that to turn it off. You can click it to turn it on again. So I've got this multi-cut tool, and you can see that it automatically will come to a point, that yellow point. So what I can do is I can say multi-cut, and I can come over until the point turns red. So this is telling me that I'm going to start a cut from this point. Okay, so I can click that. And now that I've started my cut from that point, I want to come all the way over to this guy here, and I want to click again because I want to end a cut at this point. Okay, so you can see that it's drawn a line in between, showing me where the cut is going to be made. So when I know that I've got a correct cut, I can just hit the enter key and it'll split that face for me. Okay, so let's go along, and I want to make a cut from here, so I know it's red. I'll click there, and I'll come over to this point until it's red. I'll click there. There it's showing me what my cut is going to look like, and I'll hit enter. Boom. Okay, so I'll speed this process up. Beautiful. And to get out of the knife tool, I'll just hit the Q key. So let's see what my mesh looks like now. Smoothed. Alright, so we have improved a little bit, just a little bit. So we've got, it looks like it's quads, but we're not quite there yet. We're not out of the woods yet. So if I hit the smooth key, one of my main issues that I'm seeing is that it's not holding that square shape. I want this nice thickness. I want to hold this thickness. Okay. So the way I can do that is I'm going to drop an edge loop. I'm going to drop a couple of edge loops into the side here. So I'm going to go to the insert edge loop tool, and I'm going to click and drag on these edges. So I'm going to drop one right there. Maybe there. Okay, so I'll drop one there. And I'll drop one about the equal distance on the other side. So what this has done is it's actually created, and I'll hit the Q key, remember hit the Q key, get out of that. What it's done is it's actually created an edge loop all the way around. Okay, all the way around. And when I hit the smooth key, there we go. So we're holding that. You can see now that it's retaining this shape. When I hit the smooth key, it's retaining that nice thickness. Okay, looking pretty good. So let's hit Control S to save that. Beautiful. Okay, so my faceplate's nice. It's already looking great. Okay, but I'm not done yet, because this face here still has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sides. So that's no good. So how do I get rid of the 8 side problem? Well, how about if I make a cut from here all the way down to here, and then I make a cut all the way down from this point. So from this guy, maybe I can make a cut right across the entire plate to this guy. So let's go ahead and do that. And I know you're thinking, what the hell is Brad thinking? Like, this is insane. Well, bear with me here. Okay, so I'm going to make a cut. I'm going to start a cut here. Okay, we're on a long journey. And what I'm going to do is, if I'm not making a cut from, if I'm not making a cut to a point and I want to cut onto a line, I can hold shift. So if I were to just click and drag somewhere on this line, you can see I have this percentage value. So it's showing me that it's going to cut somewhere along the line, okay? So before you go and do this, you might want to just watch me for a second. So you can see that I have this weird float percentage number. But if I hold the shift key while I'm dragging, boop, look at that. It snaps to a percent value. So that's pretty cool, right? Okay. So for now it's giving me 90%, which isn't exactly what I wanted, but it's good enough. So I'm just going to say 90%. And I'll let go there. And I'll come over here, hold shift, snap, 10%. Okay. Which is the same as 90%. Okay, 90%. And then I'm going to come over to this point here, and then I'll click there. Okay. So I can see I've got this cut that's running along, right? I've got this cut that's running along from this point, okay, not the inside point, but this point, all the way around to this point. And I'll hit enter. So I've made a nice cut. And again, guys, do this carefully. Don't rush it. Okay. So I'll hit the smooth key, see how that looks. Okay. Now I'm going to do the same for the other side. I'm going to make a cut from here. I'll hold the shift key. 90%. Hold the shift key. 10%. Hold the shift key. 90%. And I'll zoom in. And I'll find this point, and I don't have to hold the shift key once I've found a point, because the shift key again is only to snap to a percentage on a line. So I'll find this outer point, I'll make sure the outer point is highlighted in red, and then I'll click once, and it's showing me, now it's showing me that entire cut, the way the cut's going to look. I think it's good. I'll hit enter. Okay. So let's do the same to the top edges. So I'm going to come in here. I'll grab this guy. Hold shift. So I'll go to 10% on the top. And it's going to say 90% there. 10% there. And I'm going to come to this. This bottom point here. This bottom point. Okay, and I'll click that, and I'll hit enter. Okay. And I'll hit Control S to save my work before I do anything else. So that's brought me out of my multi-cut tool when I saved. So I'll just go back and I'll click multi-cut. And I'm going to grab this guy. I'll click that. Hold shift. Click and drag. 10%. That's good. Hold shift, click and drag. Okay. 90%. That's good. Click and drag. 10%. That's good. So 90% and 10% are the same. They just kind of switch them around. Maya just switches it around every once in a while. Again, Maya, she's a cruel woman. Maya's a cruel woman. She plays tricks. She's a trickster. Witchy woman. Okay. So here's my end point again. I'm just gonna click on that when it's red, and boom. Okay. So now if I hit the Q key, I get out of that tool, I'll go to object mode. So now I got a nice looking face. Okay. I'm liking it. Okay. So now I'm going to do the same thing with these guys. Only I'm going to cut downward. Okay, I'm going to cut down and across this way. Okay. So I'm going to make a cut from here, and I'll click and drag here, holding shift. So I'll go to about 90%. Okay, holding shift. Remember, hold shift, 90. Hold shift, click and drag, 90. Okay, hold shift, click and drag, 10%, which is the same as 90. That's okay. And then I'm going to come up to this point here until it's. I'm going to cut to a point. So make sure it's red. I'll click that guy. I'll just take a look and see what my cut's going to look like. That looks good, and I'll hit enter. Okay, so you get the picture. I'm going to do the same for the other side. I'm going to speed things up a little bit. Okay, I'm just speeding up a little bit. You guys, you should now know how to use this tool. And if you don't, just go back and rewatch it. Scrub through the video, like I say. If you need to go back and watch how to use the tool, just scrub through it. Scrub back. Nothing wrong with going back and reviewing what I'm teaching you. In fact, I encourage it. I employ it. Okay. Okay, so you'll see what I'm doing here. You'll see what I'm doing here. You're like, honestly, Brad, this better of a god darn means to an end. A goldang means to an end. It does. Believe me. Believe. Believe me. Believe me. Okay. All right. So, at this point, now, I've got a situation where, oh my God, looky. So what are we left with here? We're left with one face, as opposed to this face that had a whole bunch of like extra edges in it, or sides in it. Now we've got a face that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh my God. But wait. I can cut from here to here, which makes one face, one 6-sided face, turn into two 4-sided faces. So I can make a cut from here to here. And I can make a cut from here to here. Boop. Now, you guys are thinking to yourself like, holy shit, we didn't do this in class at all. Like, what is this like ninja modeling that this guy's doing? We didn't do it in class because we didn't have time. But I'm demonstrating to you a method of how to keep things in quads. Now, I don't expect you to completely remember this, but if you run into a situation where you've got a cube with rounded corners in 4, and that's why I told you guys to use even numbers, so that when we divided all of this up, we could end up with 2 4-sided faces on the corners. And that's why it's important that when you're modeling, you think about the number of divisions you put into something, because it can greatly affect the end result of your model in the long run. Down the pipeline. Down the pipeline. Working on the model. Yeah. Damn, you look so fine. Damn, baby, you look so fine. Sexy model. Okay. So now we've got a model that's solving much better. Now I can even go even further than this and clean this stuff up, but I won't. Basically, you're gravy. You're golden. You got a faceplate, homie. Alright. Let's leave that faceplate alone. Alright. Now that is a near perfect faceplate. So you've just learned how to take what we learned in class and go one step further. In fact, a whole lot of steps further. Okay. All right. Beautiful. So hopefully you guys got your Maya installed, because you're going to need to know this stuff. And I'm expecting you to model at home. Okay. So now I need to unhide my tankard and fix it up. Remember how we had that hole in the tankard? We had to fix it up. Well, I got this P cylinder thing here, because it grouped everything under this P cylinder. And by the way, what I did was I came over and I opened up my outliner. You can also access the outliner by going to Window, Outliner. Okay, so I can bring up the outliner here like this, polycylinder, and I can click this polysurface. Okay, so you can see this polysurface 1. That's my tankard shape after we extruded or pulled off this faceplate. So you can see the faceplate is polysurface 2. The tankard is polysurface 1. So what it did was, when we did that extraction, it renamed these two things polysurface 1 and polysurface 2, and it threw it under a group. So what I want to do is I want to grab this polysurface 1 object and say Shift H. And there's my tankard again. And in fact, what I'm going to do is click and drag over these two objects here, and I'm going to say Shift P. Okay? Shift P. And what I can do is I can hold, I can click this P cylinder, this group here, because I don't need it anymore, and I can delete that. So polysurface 1, I'm going to rename this tankard 1. Okay. In fact, what you guys should be naming this is mesh underscore tankard underscore 1. Mesh underscore tankard underscore 1. And let's call this mesh faceplate 1. So when we're modeling objects, you always need to prefix your mesh object names with the name mesh, so that we know that this is a 3D mesh that we're going to deform later on or rig or do whatever with. So mesh the name of your object, and then 1. So we need to clean up this tankard now, okay? So because we had a hole in it, we don't want that hole in there anymore, right? So I'm going to go to edge mode, and I'm going to double click. Okay, for you guys, don't double click because I want you to make sure you're carefully selecting the top and bottom rows. So let's just make sure that we very carefully select those. So I'm going to come over until this top edge is red. I'll click. I'm going to hold shift. I'll come over here. Click. 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 Okay, now the bottom row, very carefully. Click. 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 Making sure I'm holding shift. Click. I'll go into wireframe mode by hitting the 4 key. I just want to make sure that I've only got the top and the bottom row selected. You don't want any other edges selected. So I'll hit the 5 key when I'm confident with that, and I'm going to come over to my modeling toolkit again, and I'm going to say bridge. Very nice. So it's bridge those polys, and I can hit smooth, hit the Q key to get out of that tool, and I'll go back into object mode. And now I'm going to grab this guy, and with this guy selected, my faceplate selected, I'm going to grab it on the Z axis. On the Z axis, make sure it's yellow. Make sure that arrow goes yellow. I'm going to grab it and I'm going to drag it back over top of my tankard. And also with this guy selected, let's go up to modify. My pivot is way down here. I don't want that. I want my pivot on my object to be centered. So I'm going to say modify, center, pivot. Okay. And I'm going to move this back just like that. Okay. And there is my tankard. With the faceplate. Okay. And I can select both of these guys and hit the 1 key again. Okay. And now what do we need? We need a handle, right? We need a handle. So let's grab another object. We're going to grab another mesh, another primitive. We're going to grab a cube. So I grab a cube, pull it over, and I'll position my cube just like this. Okay. I'm going to grab the top and bottom faces and pull them around. Okay. Just like this. And maybe I'll go into vertex mode. Okay. And I'll pull down these vertices on the y-axis, and I'll grab these two guys carefully, okay, and I'll pull them up on the y-axis, okay, and then maybe I'll grab all of these guys, all of them, okay, and I'll hit the R key to scale them, and I'm going to scale these on the Z axis like this so that it makes my handle a little bit thinner. Okay, and I'll hit the 5 key. I'll go back into shaded mode, and thinking that looks fairly good. And now I need to pull these faces this way. So I'm going to go to face mode. I'll grab this face, and I'll hold shift, and I'll grab the bottom face as well. And then I'm going to say extrude. So I'm going to come over to the edit mesh menu, face, extrude. And before I use any of these attributes, I'm not going to touch any of these guys because I actually want to pull the face directly this way. So instead, I'm just going to hit the W key right out of the extrude tool. So I'll hit the W key, and then I will grab on the x-axis and just pull this way. Okay. And now I'm going to reposition by going into vertex mode. I'll go to vertice mode, so vertex mode. And then I'm going to grab these guys and just shape these a little more. Like that. And then I'll grab these guys and I'll pull them over. Okay. And then I'll go into wireframe mode just to see all of my points, and I'll click and drag over those points and I'll pull them in a little bit. I'll come up here and click and drag over these guys and I'll pull them in a little bit. And I think my handle is a little bit too thick on the bottom here, so what I'm going to do is I'll go back into wireframe mode and I'm going to grab all of the bottom ones here, and then I'm pulling them up on the Y like that. And maybe I'll grab the outsides, pull them in. Maybe I'll grab these guys, pull them. Okay. That looks better. Okay. Okay. So when I hit the 3 key, again, it's not holding its shape very well. So I'm going to add some edge loops into this guy in order to hold its shape. So the first thing, I want it to be nice and square this way. So I'm going to grab this edge here and I'm going to say insert edge loop. And I'm going to add an edge loop by clicking and dragging on here. Okay. And I'll add another edge loop on the other side to click and drag on there. Okay. So while I'm still in the insert edge loop tool, I'm going to hit the 3 key. Okay. So if I hit the 3 key while I'm still in insert edge loop tool, it shows me both the wireframe cage and the smoothing. So I can see that it's nicely holding the shape. So I'll go back, I'll go to 1, 3, 1, 3, 1. Okay. So if I hit the 3 key while I'm on this object, I can see that it's sort of smoothing the object, and it's nicely holding that shape now because I added these edge loops on the outside and I creased those outside edges. Okay. There's that thing again we're talking about, is edge creasing. Okay. So I want to hold this shape a little more, so I'm going to add some edge loops. Maybe I'll add an edge loop right in the middle here. Right in the middle. So insert edge loop, and I'm going to click and drag along this edge here. So I'll click right there, and I'll say about halfway. Okay. And I'll hit the 3 key to see how that looks. Oh, look, so it's starting to square off this edge here. So I'm going to come over here to the middle, and I'm going to click and drag here. All right. And maybe I'll add another edge loop here in the middle of here. And I'll add an edge loop here in the middle here, and maybe another one here. Okay. So you can see I'm sort of adding some edge loops here to hold the shape here. To hold this shape. Okay. So if I hit the Q key, I hit the 3 key, I can see that it's starting to take more shape. Okay. So when I hit the smoothing, you can see that it's rounding this off quite a bit. So the way to prevent that is if I go back into my insert edge loop tool, okay, I'm going to click and drag until my edge is about there, so really close to the end. And if I hit smoothing, you can see that it's holding that shape more. Again, so I'm going to click and drag here, hit smoothing, and you can see it's holding that shape quite nicely. Okay. Perfect. I'll go into object mode, and you know what, I'll select everything and I'll say 3. So right now we can see that I've got this nice beer tankard, nice and smooth. Okay, 1 key. Remember, select your object, 3 key, 1 key, 3 key to smooth it, 1 key to not smooth it. Okay, or to get out of smoothing. Okay, so it's looking pretty good. And if I want to throw some shape into this guy, well, I can just say edge mode. And sometimes it's easier to model smooth objects while you're in smoothing. So if I'm in edge mode and I double click while I'm in sub D and I hit W key, I can start pulling this in a little bit. Okay, so there we go. We got some shape to this now. And then maybe I want to double click this edge loop. Okay, so I double click this edge loop. I've got these edges selected. I can hit F to focus in on that. And I can grab it on the y-axis, maybe pull it down a little bit, shape it, mold it, grab this guy, pull it up a little. Okay. And maybe I'm seeing, well, wait a second, now this guy's not really, it's kind of coming up here and it's not holding, it's not inside the cup enough. Okay, well, why don't we go to vertex mode while we're in sub D. Okay, so we're in smoothing, and I'll grab all these guys and I'll pull them over. Remember, let's make sure we're on this y-axis or this x-axis here. I'm going to pull it in. Okay. And you know what? I might even bring it down a bit too. Okay, so again, this is like clay. We're just sculpting like clay, right? Okay. That's a pretty badass beer tankard, I gotta say. It's not bad. Okay? It's not bad. Not bad at all. And I might even, like if I want, I could take all of these vertexes here, because again, we're in this object's components, and I could just make it maybe a little bit bigger this way. So I can come to the scale tool and I can scale it on this green axis here. Make it a little bit taller. Why not, right? And maybe just a little bit fatter, so I'll scale it out this way. Okay. Perfect. And there we go. Ladies and gentlemen, your first modeled object. And we can even put some text on this if we wanted to, but I think I'm going to stop the video here. You've been modeling for a while now, so really good job. Only thing I would say is we didn't rename this polycube, so we'll just take this, and this is our handle. So we're going to say mesh underscore handle. Handle. I think you spell it handle. Handle underscore 1. All right. Cool. This is looking great. I do this thing with my friends where my buddies and I, we like do Arnold Schwarzenegger impressions all the time, and oh my god, people want to kill us. Like, it's ridiculous. We find it funny, so we don't really care what other people think. It's entertaining. So you got your tankard here. You know, and if you're from Austria, you drink a lot of beer. You know, so it's great. You go down to the Rusty Reich and you have a Luger's Light. All right, I'll shut up. He's just so entertaining. I can't help it. I mean, his movies are cheesy as all heck, but you know, I'll watch them. I don't care. I mean, the Expendables movies, it's like it's the best. Okay, so mindless killing movies, fun stuff. Throw a blend shader on this guy. So remember, you know, you can throw another shader on your object. So you can right click and hold and come down to assign favorite material, and I'll just say blend. So there you have it, people. Your tankard. Now, I mean, I'm not bragging here at all or anything, but I could have modeled this way faster, okay? But that's only because you know, I wanted to make sure that you guys were like following along and everything. So again, like you know, you want to get you the only reason I bring up the fact that I could say, ooh, Brad thinks he's so freaking special is like, okay, no, I'm not showing off. The point I'm trying to make is it's it's a thing that's just it's just practice, and really this should really take you, like modeling something like this should take you no more than like 5 minutes. Really? 5 minutes? Wow. Yeah, 5 minutes. And you'll get there. But slow and steady wins the race, Captain Stubing. Captain Stubing. I love that movie. What's it called? Ace Ventura. I think the first one's the best. Second one's funny, but the first one's the best. When I watched the first one, like after I'd watched the second one, I hadn't seen the first one in like so long. Man, that's a funny movie. I think he's just more like wacky in the first one. I like it. Okay, I'm totally digressing, so I'm going to stop. Tankard. Okay. Good job, everybody. Really good job. And if you want, I can show you add text here. It's really easy. Yeah. But if you have any questions about how things work, pop me an email. But really good job. And I'll see you in the next video that I make. I think I'm going to do a little video on how to fix spherical poles. I know you're like, okay, what the hell is this he's talking about? Don't worry. I'll send you the video. Check it out. Okay? And again, please, please make sure you try and get Maya, because if you don't, you're going to struggle. Trust me. I mean, you know, this week was great. You did a good job. But definitely, I think, you know, it's going to help you speed up if you've got Maya at home and you're screwing around with it and just practicing. So let's all of us get Maya installed, and if you're watching these videos, you'll be able to follow along and you'll get the hang of things. Okay, good talk. Bye bye for now.